What if the one person you trusted most, the person who was supposed to have your back, betrayed you in the worst possible way? And what if, in the chaos of that betrayal, you realized you weren't innocent either? My name is Rebecca, and I thought I had it all: a successful career, a loving husband named Mark, and a best friend, Sophie, who had been with me through everything. Life was supposed to be simple, right? I had built a life I was proud of, or at least I thought I had. But when the truth came crashing down, I realized nothing was as perfect as it seemed. One night, everything shattered. The man I had loved for years, the man I had stood by through thick and thin, was sleeping with my best friend. Sophie, my closest confidant, was having an affair with Mark. I didn't find out by accident. No, I found out because of my own secret, my affair with someone else. It's crazy, right? How could I, of all people, judge them for something I was also guilty of? But that's how it happened. My entire world crumbled around me as I stood there holding the evidence of their betrayal. And the worst part wasn't just the lies or the secrets. It was realizing that I wasn't as innocent as I had hoped. I had crossed a line too. I had hurt Mark the same way he hurt me. And I had no idea what to do next. So here I am, telling you this story, hoping you understand that sometimes the most shocking betrayals come from the people we trust the most. But even more shocking is realizing that sometimes we are the ones who betray ourselves. Stay with me. The truth I'm about to share might be the hardest thing I've ever had to face, but it's the truth nonetheless. I stood there, my hands shaking, staring at the message that had just shattered everything. I had never seen anything like this before. The words on the screen were searing through me like a hot knife, leaving nothing but emptiness in their wake. It was all right there, in black and white, proof of my husband's affair with my best friend. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I couldn't cry. Not yet. Mark had always been my rock. He was the one who knew me best, or so I thought. When we first met, I knew he was the one. He was steady, reliable, everything I needed in a partner. We built a life together, an apartment in the city, a dog we both adored, dinner parties with friends. We shared everything, or so I believed. But what I saw on that phone made me question everything I thought I knew about him, about us. And then there was Sophie. I couldn't even begin to wrap my head around the fact that she, my closest friend, the one I confided in about everything, was the person who had crossed the line with him. She knew me inside out. How could she betray me like this? I always thought that if my marriage faltered, Sophie would be the one to catch me, the one to help me pick up the pieces. Instead, she was the one shoving the knife in deeper, twisting it, and I was too numb to scream. But as the shock wore off, another truth crept in, one that I couldn't ignore. I wasn't innocent in all of this. In fact, I had been lying too. I had been seeing James. I met him at work, at a time when everything in my marriage felt like it was slipping through my fingers. He was different from Mark. He didn't have the steady calmness that Mark did, but there was something electrifying about him. He listened to me, truly listened, when I felt like no one else did. Our late-night talks turned into more, and suddenly I was falling for someone else. It didn't matter how many times I told myself that it was just a fling, that it was just a distraction. I knew it was more than that. But here's the thing. I didn't set out to hurt Mark. I never planned on betraying him. But somewhere along the way, I started to make excuses. I told myself that if Mark and I were truly happy, I wouldn't have felt the need for James. But that's the thing about lies. You convince yourself they're the truth. For a while, I believed that James was just filling a gap that was missing in my life, that it was harmless, even if it wasn't. But deep down, I knew. I knew that what I was doing was wrong, that I was playing with fire. And now, standing here, facing the consequences of my own choices, the weight of it all was suffocating. I wanted to scream, to punch something, but all I could do was stand frozen. I wanted to lash out at Mark and Sophie, but I couldn't ignore the fact that I had done the exact same thing. How could I accuse them of betrayal when I had been doing the same thing for months? I started to question everything. Was this really my fault? Was I the one who pushed Mark away? Did I create this distance between us? Or was this just how it was meant to be? The confusion, the guilt, the overwhelming sense of being lost, it was all consuming. I kept asking myself if I could ever forgive myself, let alone forgive Mark or Sophie. How could I face them again, knowing what I'd done? I was stuck in a storm of my own making. My emotions were a mess, a whirlwind of anger, regret, confusion, and a little bit of shame. I felt like a stranger in my own life, unable to recognize the woman I'd become. Every decision I made seemed to lead to more chaos, more hurt. I couldn't fix this. I didn't know how to fix it. I sat down, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I needed to make a decision. But what was I supposed to do now? Was there even a chance for redemption? Or had I already burned every bridge I had? In the end, I realized something. I couldn't fix everything. Some things, once broken, are beyond repair. But I had to decide if I could find a way to rebuild myself, to move forward, or if I would let the pieces of my life fall away, lost in the wreckage of my mistakes. It all started so innocently, or at least that's what I told myself. James was just a colleague. We worked together on a few projects, late nights at the office, the usual routine. But somewhere between the endless cups of coffee and the shared jokes about our clients, something shifted. He noticed things about me that no one else did, little details about my day that seemed insignificant to everyone else, but to James, they mattered. And I couldn't help but feel seen in a way I hadn't in a long time. At first, it was harmless, just conversations about work. But as weeks passed, the conversations grew longer, deeper. We started talking about things beyond deadlines and office gossip. We talked about our lives, our pasts, our dreams. He made me laugh in ways I hadn't laughed in years. He was spontaneous, adventurous, and so incredibly different from Mark. Mark was steady. He was dependable, always there when I needed him. But somewhere along the way, that steadiness started to feel like a cage. It wasn't that I didn't love him anymore. It was more like I had fallen into a routine. Our life had become predictable, and predictability had turned into a kind of boredom. I couldn't tell Mark how I felt without making him feel like I was ungrateful for everything he'd done for us. He had worked so hard for our life together, and I didn't want to be the one to shake things up. But with James, I didn't have to explain. He understood me in ways Mark couldn't, or maybe just wouldn't. One evening, after a particularly long day, James and I stayed late at the office, finishing up some paperwork. By then, we were more than just colleagues. We were friends, friends who shared personal things. That night, we ended up talking for hours. The clock ticked past midnight, and we both knew we should head home, but neither of us moved. And then, without warning, it happened. James leaned in, his breath warm against my ear, as he whispered something about how he admired my strength, how he'd always been drawn to people who pushed through adversity. And before I could even process it, his lips were on mine. For a split second, I froze. My mind screamed at me to stop, to pull away, but my body wasn't listening. In that moment, all the suppressed feelings, all the loneliness I'd felt for so long came rushing to the surface. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. It was like something had clicked, something I didn't even know was missing. And before I knew it, I was kissing him back. I didn't know what I expected to happen after that night. In the back of my mind, I told myself it was a mistake. Maybe it was just the exhaustion from work or the overwhelming tension that had built up in me over months of feeling unseen. But deep down, I knew it was more. I knew that the connection we had wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was real, and I was drawn to him in a way I couldn't explain. From then on, we saw each other more often. It was never planned, but somehow we always found an excuse to meet. At first, it was lunch breaks that stretched longer than usual. Then it was late night texts, and before long, we were sneaking out of work to grab drinks, to talk, to laugh. We were so careful, always texting in code, never leaving any trace of what was happening between us. It was like living in two worlds, the world where I was a devoted wife, and the world where I was just Rebecca, someone free to be herself, someone who could feel wanted again. Every time I kissed him, every time I saw him, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. With Mark, I was comfortable, but with James, I felt excited, invigorated, like I was rediscovering a part of myself that I had long buried. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know if I wanted to stop it, but there was always this nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I was betraying Mark. I was betraying the very vows I had taken, the life I had built. And Sophie, she had been there for me through everything. She had been my confidant, my support. How could I have let this happen? How could I have crossed that line with James, knowing that my own best friend might one day be the one to feel the same pain I was causing? Every day, the guilt weighed heavier on me. Every time I saw the guilt was unbearable. It was like a shadow that followed me everywhere, growing longer and darker with each passing day. I couldn't look at Mark without seeing the lie in my eyes. I couldn't talk to Sophie without feeling the weight of her trust, her belief in me, shattering in slow motion. But it wasn't just the guilt that gnawed at me, it was the jealousy too, the nagging, relentless jealousy that I couldn't shake. Every time I saw Mark with Sophie, I felt a tight knot in my stomach. They were so comfortable with each other, so natural. And I wondered, in those quiet moments when I watched them talk and laugh together, if Sophie had known all along. Did she see the changes in me, the distance in my eyes when I spoke about Mark? Or was she just as oblivious as I had been, too wrapped up in her own life to notice the cracks in mine? I hated myself for even thinking this way. I hated that I was beginning to question every little thing, every innocent conversation they shared. And then there was James. Every time I saw him, every time I kissed him, the thrill was still there, but so was the fear. The fear that if anyone found out, if anyone connected the dots, it would all come crashing down. I couldn't keep living this double life. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when, deep down, I knew it wasn't. But it wasn't just my jealousy towards Sophie that kept me up at night. It was what I saw in Mark. He had started acting differently too. He was distant, more withdrawn than he used to be. At first, I told myself it was just stress from work, or maybe he was just tired. But then I started noticing the small things. The way he'd leave his phone face down when I walked into the room. The way he'd hurry to the bathroom whenever his phone buzzed. It was like he was hiding something, and it sent a chill through me because I knew that feeling too well. The feeling of trying to cover up a secret, trying to keep something buried that you weren't ready to face. There were days when I wanted to confront him, to ask if he knew, if he suspected, but I couldn't. The shame was too much. What would I say? Hey, Mark, I think you might be cheating on me, but by the way, I've been seeing someone else too? The irony wasn't lost on me. It wasn't just his betrayal I was afraid of. It was mine. If I confronted him, I'd have to come clean. I'd have to admit that I had crossed a line, that I had destroyed the trust between us just as he had. And that scared me more than anything. The jealousy, the guilt, the fear, it was all eating me alive. There were nights I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd got here. How did I let things go this far? How did I let myself slip so far from who I thought I was? I wanted to blame Mark, I wanted to blame Sophie, I wanted to blame James. But deep down, I knew I was the one who allowed it to happen. I was the one who chose to go down this path. I could feel myself pulling away from Mark, from Sophie, from everything I knew. It was like I was slipping into a different version of myself, one that was constantly on edge, always looking over my shoulder, wondering if this was the day everything would come crashing down. I'd tell myself that it wasn't that bad, that I was just caught in a moment, that I could make it right. But the truth was, I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know how to put the pieces back together when they were already scattered. And then there were the moments when I felt the weight of my lies crush me. I would catch myself laughing with Mark or having a quiet moment with Sophie, and I would remember James. I would remember the nights we spent together, the way he made me feel, the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the room. And I would feel sick. How could I let this happen? How could I betray the people I loved the most? It was a constant battle, trying to keep up the facade, trying to maintain the life I had built, while also living in this secret world of lies and deceit. And I didn't know how much longer I could keep it up. The tension was rising, and I could feel it in every word, every glance, every conversation. Something had to give, but I didn't know if I was ready for the fallout. I never expected to find out the way I did. It was one of those moments where everything in your life comes to a screeching halt. You think you're safe, that everything is fine, and then, out of nowhere, your world cracks open, and you realize you were living in a lie. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon when it happened. I'd been home all day, cleaning, organizing, trying to keep myself busy. Mark was working, as usual. I had no reason to feel suspicious, at least not until I picked up his phone by accident. I know. I shouldn't have done it. But the moment I saw it, I felt this irresistible pull to open it. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was a sense of dread that something wasn't right. Either way, it was too late to back out once I unlocked the screen. There it was, an entire thread of messages between Mark and Sophie. It wasn't just friendly banter. It wasn't just casual texting like we all do with our friends. These messages were different. The tone was intimate, filled with jokes that were just for the two of them, Comments that made it clear this was more than just a friendship. It was obvious now. The way they laughed together, the little inside jokes, the teasing remarks that felt too close to the kind of things only a couple would share. And there it was, one message that hit me like a ton of bricks. I can't wait to see you later. I miss you already. My heart dropped to my stomach. I read the words over and over again, like I was hoping, wishing that maybe I had misinterpreted them. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe it was some innocent joke, something completely harmless. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This was a betrayal. I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was closing in on me. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or just run away from it all. I felt like I was drowning in my own emotions, the shock of it all sinking in slowly but surely. How could Mark, the man I trusted, the man I married, do this to me? And Sophie, my best friend, the one I confided in, the one who knew everything about my marriage, how could she betray me like this? I felt like my whole life had been turned upside down in that single moment. The man I loved, the woman I trusted, they were both lying to me, behind my back, in the worst possible way. And I had been too blind to see it, too wrapped up in my own guilt and distractions to notice the signs, the small cracks in the foundation of my life. But the worst part? It wasn't just the shock of finding out. It was the anger that came after. I felt a wave of rage hit me, burning hotter than anything I had ever experienced. How could they do this to me? How could they pretend everything was fine when they were both betraying me? I couldn't sit with it anymore. I couldn't pretend that I didn't know what was happening. I had to confront them. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. So I called Mark. I had to. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay. I needed to hear him say it. I needed him to admit what I already knew deep down. When he answered, there was hesitation in his voice. It was almost like he knew that everything was about to come crashing down. I asked him outright, "Mark, is there something you're not telling me? Is there something going on with you and Sophie?" There was silence on the other end, a long, heavy silence that stretched on for what felt like an eternity. And then he said it. "Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen." The words stung. They weren't enough. They would never be enough. But they were the truth, the confession. And as much as it hurt, I had to hear it. Because now, I knew that the life I had built, the life I trusted, was nothing but a facade. But that wasn't all. Sophie had to be confronted too. It wasn't just Mark's betrayal I was dealing with. It was hers too. And as I stood there, heart racing, the moment I hung up with Sophie, my mind was in a frenzy. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. Everything felt like it was happening in slow motion, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. But it was mine. It was all my life. And suddenly, I couldn't escape it. I knew what I had to do. I had to face Mark. I had to make him look me in the eyes and admit the truth. But deep down, I was terrified. I didn't know if I was strong enough to hear it. I didn't know if I could bear the weight of his lies, his betrayal. How could he have done this to me? And Sophie, how could she, of all people, betray me like this? I grabbed my purse and headed out the door. The house felt suffocating, like it was closing in on me with every step I took. As I drove to Mark's office, I kept replaying everything in my mind. I kept hearing the messages, Sophie's voice, Mark's hesitation when I asked him earlier. It all played over and over like a broken record, getting louder, more real with each passing second. When I arrived at his office, I didn't even know what I was going to say. I didn't have a plan. All I knew was that I had to confront him. I walked up to the building, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands shaking with a mix of anger and fear. I found him in his office staring out the window. He didn't hear me walk in. For a moment, I stood there, watching him, wondering if he knew what was coming, wondering if he could sense how much I hated him in that moment. "Mark," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned around, and I could see the moment he realized what was happening. His face went pale, and his eyes filled with guilt. "Rebecca, we need to talk." "Yeah," I said, my voice shaking now with barely contained emotion. "We do need to talk." I couldn't look at him, not yet. Instead, I stared at the floor, at the shoes I had worn to meet him, the same shoes I'd worn countless times before, walking into this office, walking into this life. But now, everything felt different. Everything felt wrong. I took a deep breath. I had to say it. I couldn't hold back anymore. I couldn't let him think he was going to get away with this. "I know about you and Sophie," I said, my voice cold now. "I know what's been going on between you two." He froze. I saw him stiffen, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. "It's true, isn't it?" I pressed. "You've been sleeping with her. All this time, behind my back. How long has this been going on, Mark?" He looked away, his guilt written all over his face. He didn't answer at first, and in that silence, I could feel my anger building, pushing its way to the surface. "I'm sorry, Rebecca," he finally muttered. "I never meant for this to happen. It was a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you." "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice rising now, the tears welling up in my eyes. "How is this a mistake, Mark? You slept with her. You lied to me. You betrayed me. This isn't a mistake. This is a choice. You chose her over me. You chose to hurt me." I could see him start to crumble. His shoulders sagged, his face twisted in remorse. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. No apology could make up for what he had done. "I'm sorry," he said again, his voice breaking. "I was wrong. I was selfish, and I regret everything. I wish I could take it all back." "I don't care about your regrets, Mark," I yelled now, my frustration pouring out. "You don't get to break my heart and expect me to just forgive you because you feel bad. I trusted you, I loved you, and you betrayed me." I took a step back, unable to be in the same room with him anymore. The weight of everything he had done was suffocating. He had shattered everything between us, and I couldn't see how anything could ever be fixed. "And Sophie?" I asked, my voice quieter now, almost too tired to keep fighting. Mark didn't answer right away, but I could see the shame in his eyes, and for a moment I wondered if I could ever look at either of them the same way again. Could I ever trust them? Could I ever forgive them? "She's sorry." After the confrontation, everything fell silent. It was as if the world had stopped moving around me, leaving me alone with the weight of my actions, Mark's betrayal, and the devastation that had settled in my heart. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to make them feel the hurt I was carrying. But instead, I felt this crushing emptiness, a hollowness that had crept into my chest, slowly replacing everything I once felt. For the first time, I truly understood what heartbreak meant. It wasn't just about the hurt. It was about feeling like a stranger in your own life, about realizing that the person you thought you knew, the person you loved, was someone completely different. I had trusted Mark, trusted Sophie, two people who had been there for me when I needed them the most. And now they were the ones who had torn me apart. The days that followed the confrontation felt like a blur. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every morning I woke up, I had to remind myself that this was real, that my marriage, my best friend, my life, they were all gone, shattered beyond repair. I tried to focus on work, tried to distract myself with anything that would take my mind off the pain, but nothing helped. It followed me everywhere. I started to question everything. I wondered if I had always been blind to the cracks in my marriage. Maybe I had ignored the signs because I was too afraid to face the truth. Maybe I had been so consumed with my own dissatisfaction that I hadn't seen the distance growing between Mark and me. Could I have stopped it? Could I have saved us? But then I would think of James, and I would feel a pang of guilt that was almost unbearable. He wasn't supposed to be a part of this. He was supposed to be the escape, the excitement, the distraction from everything that was going wrong. But now, he felt like just another mistake, another thing that I couldn't undo. It was all so tangled up. Mark, Sophie, James, they were all pieces of the same puzzle that I didn't know how to solve. I couldn't look at Mark without feeling that deep, unrelenting anger. Every time he tried to talk to me, to apologize, I couldn't even hear him. His voice was a constant reminder of everything that had gone wrong. And Sophie was no better. She tried to explain herself, to tell me how sorry she was, but the words felt hollow, meaningless. She had been my best friend. She had known me better than anyone. And yet, she had betrayed me in the worst way possible. How could I ever trust her again? How could I ever look at her without seeing the lies? The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was the realization that I had let myself be a part of it. I had let myself fall into this affair, knowing full well that it was wrong, knowing that it was only going to lead to more pain. I had done the same thing Mark and Sophie had done to me, and I hated myself for it. I felt so lost. I had no idea who I was anymore. Was I the woman who had built a life with Mark? Or was I the woman who had betrayed him and destroyed everything we had worked for? Was I someone who could ever be trusted again? Could I ever trust myself again? Days turned into weeks, and I found myself sinking deeper into a well of despair. I couldn't escape the feeling of being trapped in my own mind, suffocated by my thoughts. I started avoiding the people who cared about me. I stopped talking to my family, stopped seeing my friends. I couldn't face them, couldn't let them see the mess I had become. How could I explain all of this to them? How could I tell them that I had destroyed everything, that I had ruined the one thing that had ever mattered? I would sit in my apartment, staring at the walls, feeling like I was drowning. My own thoughts were louder than anything else. It was like I was in a constant state of self-punishment, constantly replaying everything I had done, everything I lost. I wanted to run away, to escape, but there was no escape. The guilt and shame followed me wherever I went. Some nights, I would find myself wondering if The days after the confrontation felt like a blur. My world had turned upside down, and I had no idea how to make sense of anything anymore. Mark and I barely spoke. The anger and hurt between us were too raw, too fresh to even attempt a conversation. Sophie tried to reach out, but I couldn't face her. Every time I saw her name pop up on my phone, my stomach churned with the same betrayal I had felt when I first saw the messages between her and Mark. But as much as I tried to ignore it, I couldn't escape the truth. I couldn't escape the guilt that gnawed at me from the inside. I had crossed the line. I had betrayed Mark just as much as he had betrayed me. And I had kept it a secret, one that no one knew about, a secret that I had buried deep inside, hoping it would never come to light. I thought I had gotten away with it. I thought the lies I had told myself, telling myself it was just a fling, telling myself that James didn't mean anything, would protect me from the consequences. But deep down, I knew that was just wishful thinking. Secrets have a way of coming to the surface, and no matter how much I wanted to pretend it didn't matter, it did. It mattered. The first time I noticed something was wrong was when I received a text from James. It was brief, just a simple, "We need to talk." My heart raced. I hadn't spoken to him since that night we had shared, the night everything changed. I thought I was done with him. I thought the affair had ended with that final goodbye. But now, here he was, reaching out again, and it didn't take a genius to figure out why. I met him at a coffee shop later that day. He was waiting for me at a table in the corner, looking nervous, almost guilty. When I sat down, I could tell he wasn't himself. He wasn't the confident, charismatic James I had known. His eyes were a little too wide, his hands shaking as he took a sip of his coffee. "I don't know how to say this," he started, his voice low and almost apologetic. "But I think it's time you knew the truth." I felt my stomach drop. My mind raced with possibilities. What truth? What could he possibly say that I hadn't already figured out? "It's about Sophie," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "She knows. She knows everything, Rebecca. She knows about me. She knows about the affair." I froze. My heart stopped beating for a moment. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, and I couldn't catch my breath. Sophie knew? How? When? Why hadn't she said anything? "Wait," I said, my voice shaking. "How could she know? I've been so careful. No one knows about us, James. No one." James leaned forward, his face serious. "I don't know how she found out, but she did, and she's been trying to make things right. She told Mark. She told him everything." My world tilted. It was as if the ground beneath me had cracked open and I was falling. I could barely process what he was saying. Sophie, my best friend, had told Mark everything. She had revealed my secret, the one I thought I had kept hidden. And now, Mark knew. He knew everything. The rush of emotions hit me all at once. Shock, betrayal, panic. The one person who I thought I could trust with my pain, with my shame, had turned on me. She had told him. She had made the decision to expose my secret, to drag everything into the light. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could hear was the pounding in my ears, the deafening sound of my own heartbeat. I felt like I was drowning, and no matter how hard I tried to stay afloat, I was sinking deeper into the mess I had created. James leaned forward, his voice barely audible. "He's hurt, Rebecca. He deserves to know the truth. You both deserve the truth." I couldn't even respond. I just nodded numbly, not knowing what to say. I didn't know if I could face Mark. I didn't know if I could face the consequences of everything I had done. But I knew one thing for sure. The truth was out. Sophie had pulled the trigger. The secret was no longer mine to keep. That night, I went home to an empty house. Mark was out, and I knew he was probably processing everything I had done. What was I supposed to do now? How was I supposed to look him in the eye after everything that had come to light? I sat there, feeling the weight of it all. The guilt, the shame, the regret. It was crushing. The night felt endless. I sat alone in our living room, staring at the walls that had once been filled with so much warmth and love. Now, they felt cold, empty, like the life I had carefully built was slipping away with every passing second. I didn't know how we had gotten here. How did my perfect life turn into this? It felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't escape from. Mark hadn't come home yet. I didn't know if he was still processing everything or if he was out there deciding whether he wanted to even come back. Part of me feared that this could be the end, that our marriage, the one we had built over the last decade, was completely shattered. And the worst part, I wasn't sure if I even deserved a second chance. I had to face him, though. I knew it. I couldn't run from this any longer. Mark deserved to know everything, the truth, all of it, laid bare. I had been living in a fog of lies for so long, hiding behind the mask of a perfect life, pretending to be the person I thought I should be. But now, there was no more pretending. The betrayal had been exposed, and there was nothing left to do but face the consequences of my actions. When Mark finally walked through the door, I could see it in his eyes, the pain, the disbelief. I had never seen him like this before. He was a man broken, and I knew I was the one who had shattered him. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, staring at me, like he was waiting for me to speak. And in that silence, I realized how much we had both been avoiding, how much we had both been hiding from the truth. "I'm sorry," I said, the words slipping out of my mouth before I could stop them. "I'm so, so sorry." Mark shook his head. "You're sorry?" His voice was hoarse, almost unrecognizable. "You've been lying to me, to Sophie, to everyone we know, and now you're sorry?" I felt my chest tighten as I realized the full weight of what I had done, the pain I had caused, not just to him, but to everyone around me. "I don't know what else to say, Mark," I whispered. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you, but I did. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know I'm sorry." He looked away, his face a mask of anger and hurt. "How could you do this, Rebecca? How could you betray me like this, after everything we've been through?" "I don't have an answer for you," I said, my voice breaking. "I wish I could explain why I did it, but I don't even understand it myself. I got lost. I was too focused on what I was missing instead of what I had, and I made the worst decision of my life." The tears I had been holding back finally started to spill. I hadn't cried like this in a long time. It wasn't just the guilt. It was the overwhelming sadness, the loss, the realization that I might have destroyed the one thing that meant the most to me. Mark sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. "Do you even know how much you've hurt me? How much you've hurt Sophie? Do you know what this has done to us?" "I know," I whispered. "I know. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I need you to know that I'm not the person I was when I made those mistakes. I see that now, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make things right, even if I can't fix everything. He looked at me for a long time, like he was trying to decide if he could ever believe that I was truly sorry. And in that moment, I realized something important. I couldn't control what Mark decided. I couldn't undo the past. But I could take responsibility for my actions. I could try to heal myself, no matter what happened between us. "I need time," Mark finally said, his voice soft. "I need time to think. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, but I can't make any decisions right now." I nodded, understanding. I couldn't expect him to just forgive me overnight. It would take time, maybe even years, to rebuild the trust I had broken. But in that moment, I realized that I had to accept whatever came next. I had to let go of the need to control the outcome. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself standing at a crossroads, staring at the path ahead with a mix of uncertainty and dread. My world had been shattered, and every step I took felt heavy with the weight of my mistakes. But even in the midst of all the chaos and heartbreak, I knew something had changed within me. I had to face the consequences of my actions, no matter how painful they were. And for the first time in a long while, I found myself asking, what now? Mark and I didn't have the answers. We didn't know if we could ever rebuild what we had, or if it was even worth trying. But what I did know was that I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep carrying the guilt of my mistakes as if it were the only thing that defined me. It was hard, almost impossible at times, but I had to start over. I had to forgive myself, even if it was the hardest thing I would ever do. I spent days, even nights, reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about the lies I had told, the trust I had broken, the people I had hurt. But I also thought about the lessons I had learned. I had learned that love wasn't enough to fix everything, that trust is something you build, not just something you say. And most of all, I learned that forgiveness, both for others and for myself, wasn't a gift you give just once. It's a choice you make every day. But the question still lingered. Could I move on from this? Could I find peace after everything that had been broken? I didn't have the answer yet. Maybe I would never fully know. But I couldn't spend my life wondering what could have been or drowning in my own regrets. I started small. I began seeing a therapist to help me navigate the pain I was carrying. I reached out to friends who had been there for me before, friends I had distanced myself from during this whole mess. I started taking care of myself again, something I had forgotten to do during the chaos of my affair and the aftermath. I learned how to breathe again, how to look in the mirror and not hate the person I saw staring back at me. Mark and we were still figuring it out. There were good days and there were bad days. We talked more, not just about the affair, but about everything we had ignored for so long. We didn't have all the answers, but we were trying. Maybe that was enough for now. And as for Sophie, well, that relationship was broken, and I knew it might never be the same again. I didn't expect it to be. The trust that had been shattered couldn't be pieced back together overnight. But I hoped, in time, she would understand that I wasn't the person I had been. I wasn't the person who had hurt her so deeply. In the end, I realized that life doesn't always give you the chance to rewrite your mistakes, but it does give you the opportunity to learn from them. I couldn't change the past, but I could take responsibility for it, learn from it, and make better choices moving forward. So here I am, not knowing what the future holds, but determined to move forward one step at a time. I know I'll carry the scars with me forever, but I also know that I am stronger than I was before, and that, perhaps, is the only thing that matters.